The water came through the fuselage before the screaming did, a cold black wall that swallowed the cabin lights and turned the plane into a coffin with wings. Harlow Bennett had her seatbelt off before she understood her hands had moved. Training did that. 6 years of trauma call rooms did that. Her body acted while her mind was still 3 seconds behind, still hearing the sound the jet made when it hit the water, a sound like the ocean tearing a piece of paper. She had been hired to interpret a contract dispute in Miami, nothing more glamorous than that, and she had spent the first 20 minutes of the flight translating shipping terminology in her head out of habit, the way some people counted sheep. She had not asked why the private jet only carried 6 passengers, and 4 of them wore black suits that fit like they had been born in them. She had not asked why the man beside her, seat 2B, had not said a single word since boarding except to tell the flight attendant he did not want the champagne. She looked at him now in the strobing emergency light, water rising past his knees, and she understood for the first time that the stillness she had mistaken for arrogance was something else. He was already assessing exits. His eyes moved once, twice, cataloging the cabin the way a surgeon reads an X-ray, and in that half-second before the second impact of water hit the plane and threw them both sideways, Harlow thought, absurdly, that she had never seen a man look less afraid of dying. The second impact broke something. She heard it before she felt it, a crack of metal and a rush of cold that took her breath entirely. Water closed over her head. She kicked instinctively for what she thought was up, found a seat back instead, and for 3 full seconds Harlow Bennett believed she was going to die 22 years old in the Atlantic, wearing a blazer she had bought on clearance. Her hand found fabric. Wool, expensive, waterlogged. She pulled without thinking, the way she had been trained to pull a patient out of a wrecked car, weight distributed low, using her legs, not her back. She broke the surface with her fingers locked into the collar of a stranger's jacket and dragged him up beside her, both of them gasping against a night sky the color of a fresh bruise. He was heavier than he looked, dead weight and half-conscious, blood threading from a gash above his eyebrow and dispersing into the water in thin red ribbons. Harlow got an arm across his chest, the way she had been taught for water rescue in a pool in Atlanta a lifetime ago, and started kicking toward the only fixed point she could see, the tail section of the jet, still burning where the fuel line had caught, throwing orange light across black water. "Stay with me," she said, to a man whose name she did not know. "Do not you dare go under on me." He came back to himself somewhere in that stretch of water, coughing hard enough that she felt it against her arm, and when his eyes opened they were the flattest, most controlled eyes she had ever seen on a person who had just survived a plane crash. He did not thrash. He did not panic. He looked at her the way a man looks at a variable he had not accounted for. "You pulled me," he said. His voice was rough with salt water and something else, disbelief maybe, though it did not sound like a word that belonged to him often. "Don't thank me yet. We're not out of the water." They made it to a piece of the wing that had sheared clean and floated flat enough to hold weight, and Harlow hauled him onto it with the last of her strength, then hauled herself up beside him, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. The jet was gone beneath the surface, except for a slick of fuel and debris. Overhead, the storm that had forced the pilot into an emergency descent was already breaking apart into scattered stars, indifferent to what it had just done. "The others," Harlow said, scanning the water. "There were 6 of us." "4 of them worked for me," the man said, and something closed in his face when he said it, a door shutting on a room she was not invited into. "They will not have survived. They were positioned to shield the cabin, not to swim." Shield the cabin from what? He did not answer. He was looking past her, toward the lights of a coastline that was, impossibly, closer than she had let herself hope. Miami's skyline sat low and gold against the dark like something out of a dream she was not sure she deserved to be having. "What's your name?" she asked, because it seemed insane to have saved a man's life without knowing it. "Ji-hoon," he said, after a pause long enough that she understood he had considered lying.
Choi-Yeon.
"Harlow." She did not offer a last name. Something in his hesitation had made her cautious with her own. "You want to tell me why 4 men were positioned to shield a cabin on a private jet, Ji-hoon, or should I keep guessing?" "You should keep swimming," he said. The current is taking us south. We correct now, or we spend the night in open water. She did not love that he had dodged the question. She loved even less that he was right, and that his voice, even wrecked and freezing, carried an authority that made her body respond before her mind agreed to it. They kicked the makeshift raft north together, saying almost nothing else, until a Coast Guard cutter found them 40 minutes later, drawn by a beacon Harlow had not even known was strapped to the man's wrist, a beacon that had apparently been designed to survive exactly this kind of night. She would think about that later, the fact that he had come prepared to die, and be found. Right now she was shaking too hard to think about anything except the blanket someone put around her shoulders and the way Ji-hoon Choi watched her from across the deck of the cutter, silent, assessing, like a man doing math he did not like the answer to.
They did not speak again that night.
He was taken one direction by men who arrived in unmarked cars before the Coast Guard had even finished the paperwork, and she was taken another, to a hospital, then to a hotel the airline arranged out of liability more than kindness. She fell asleep still tasting salt water and did not dream, which felt like a mercy she had not earned. The knock came at 7 the next morning. Harlow opened the door already annoyed, expecting hotel staff, and instead found the hallway full of men in black suits, and beyond them, through the window at the end of the corridor, more vehicles than she could count at a glance, SUVs with tinted windows lined up along the curb like a funeral procession that had lost its way.
10 of them.
She counted twice to be sure the number was real. Miss Bennett. The man at the front of the group was not Ji-hoon. He was older, gray at the temples, with the careful posture of someone who had spent decades being the person who delivered bad news to people who could have him killed for delivering it badly. Mr. Choi requests the honor of your presence. Mr. Choi can request all he wants. I have a flight home in 4 hours. Your flight has been cancelled, the man said, not unkindly. For your safety. Something cold moved through her that had nothing to do with the ocean she had swallowed 12 hours earlier. Is that a threat? It is the opposite of a threat, Miss Bennett. It is the reason there are 10 vehicles outside your hotel instead of 1. 4 of Mr. Choi's men died protecting that flight from a threat that has not been neutralized. Whoever ordered that plane brought down knows your face was on the manifest. Mr. Choi would prefer you did not discover what that means for you the hard way. Harlow had spent her entire adult life being underestimated in rooms full of men who assumed a young black woman with a soft voice could be managed. She had learned to let them think that right up until it stopped being useful. I want to see him, she said.
Now.
That was the moment everything changed, though she would not understand the full shape of it until much later. They drove her not to a hotel or an office, but to a house on the water, glass and pale stone, the kind of architecture that photographed better than it lived, and she was shown into a room where Ji-hoon Choi stood at a window with his back to her, a fresh cut closed with careful black stitches above his eyebrow, wearing a shirt the exact charcoal color of the storm clouds from the night before. You look better with land under your feet, she said, because someone had to say something, and it clearly was not going to be him. He turned. Whatever composure she had witnessed on the water was fully restored now. Armor snapped back into place, but she had already seen underneath it once, and a person could not unsee that. 4 men are dead because of a decision I made, he said. A 5th would have been you, if you had not made a decision of your own. I do not like being in anyone's debt, Miss Bennett. I like it less when the debt is for my life. Then don't think of it as a debt.
Think of it as instinct.
I didn't decide to save you. My hands did before I could talk myself out of it. Something almost like amusement crossed his face, gone before it could fully arrive. That is not how the men who work for me were trained to think. It is, apparently, how you think. I'm a nurse.
Was a nurse.
Trauma unit for years, before I moved into interpreting because the hours were killing me slower than the patients were. She crossed her arms, cold despite the warmth of the room, cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. I didn't sign up for whatever this is. I signed a contract to translate shipping manifests for a logistics dispute. There was no shipping dispute. He said it flatly, an admission with no apology attached. The contract was real. The company is real. But the flight existed to move me between 2 cities without drawing attention to the fact that I was moving. Your cover. A civilian passenger list, makes a plane look ordinary. I did not choose you specifically. I chose an ordinary flight, and you were on it. The honesty of it stung worse than a lie would have. So, I almost died, so your plane could look boring. Yes. He did not soften it. And I am telling you the truth because you have earned the truth, and because lying to you now would insult what you did for me on that water. She hated that it worked on her. The bluntness, the refusal to dress the danger up in something gentler. She had spent years around men who explained themselves too much, apologized too easily, made themselves smaller to be liked. This man did neither, and something in her, something she did not examine too closely, found that unbearably clarifying. Who tried to kill you? She asked instead. A man named Han Suk-won, Ji-hoon said. He was my father's second-in-command for 11 years. My father trusted him with territory, with soldiers, with the parts of the business that required a man's whole loyalty. 2 years ago, I discovered he had been selling routes to a rival organization for the better part of a decade. I removed him from the family the way such things are removed. He has spent every day since trying to remove me from the world in return. Your father's second-in-command. Not a stranger. The people who hurt you worst are rarely strangers, Miss Bennet. Strangers do not know where to aim. She thought of her own father then, briefly, uninvited, the way old grief showed up at the worst possible moments, and pushed the thought away before it could take root. So, he brought down a plane with civilians on it, including me. He does not consider you a civilian anymore. Ji-hoon's jaw tightened, the first crack of real emotion she had seen since she walked in. You pulled me out of that water in front of a Coast Guard crew, in front of witnesses, in front of cameras on a cutter that films everything for insurance purposes. Your face is on record now, connected to mine. Han will see that footage within the week, if he is not already. So, I'm a target because I saved your life. You are a target because you exist in a story he is trying to control the ending of. I intend to make sure that ending is not yours to pay for. She should have been angrier. She told herself later that the fear should have outweighed everything else, that a sane woman would have demanded the airline rebook her flight and gone home to Atlanta and never thought about Miami or private jets or men with flat, careful eyes again. But there was something in the way he said it. I intend to make sure, not I will try, not we should discuss options, that landed in her chest like a hand pressed flat against a wound to stop the bleeding. 10 SUVs, she said. For me. 12 men, for vehicles as decoys, and a location no one outside this house knows you are in. It is not excessive. It is the minimum I am willing to accept. You don't know me. I know you did not hesitate, he said. In my experience, that tells a person almost everything worth knowing. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm Harlow had not expected to build with a stranger. He was not what the 10 SUVs had led her to imagine. He did not summon her like an employee or watch her like a prisoner. He asked, the first evening, whether she preferred to eat at 7 or 8, and when she said she did not care, he told her 7 because the kitchen staff worked better under a schedule, and she understood that this was, in its own strange language, a kindness, the offering of order to a woman whose entire life had just been thrown into chaos by people she had never met. He was careful with her in ways she noticed and did not comment on. He never entered a room she was already in without announcing himself first, a small courtesy that told her more about what had shaped him than any story could have. He did not touch her, not once in that first week, though she caught him watching the place on her arm where a bruise had bloomed dark from the crash, watching it the way a man watches something he wishes he could undo. You keep looking at my arm, she said on the 4th evening, when they were the only 2 people in the long glass dining room and the security detail had, for once, given them the illusion of privacy. I keep thinking about how it happened, he said. You hit the seat back, pulling me free. If you had gone under instead of toward me, I would not have known until it was too late to matter. I didn't have time to think about it. That is precisely what troubles me. He turned his glass slowly on the table, not drinking from it, a habit she had noticed he did when he was choosing words with more care than usual. Everyone around me calculates. My lieutenants calculate risk before they act. My enemies calculate advantage before they strike. You did neither. You simply acted, and it nearly cost you your life, and I cannot decide if that makes you the bravest person I have met or the most reckless. Maybe it's both. Maybe those aren't as different as you think. He looked at her then, really looked, the way he had looked at the water the night of the crash, cataloging, assessing, except this time she understood she was not a threat he was reading, she was something else entirely, something he did not have a category for yet. My mother was reckless, he said, and she went still, because he had not once mentioned his mother, not in 4 days of careful conversation that circled every subject that mattered and landed on none of them. She married my father knowing exactly what he was. Everyone told her to run. She said running was for people who had somewhere safer to go, and she did not believe safer existed, only different kinds of danger, and she preferred to choose hers. She died when I was 19. A rival family targeted her to send my father a message. She was not collateral. She was the message. Harlow did not reach for him. She understood, with the instinct that had made her good at her old job, that comfort offered too soon could feel like an intrusion, that some wounds needed to be looked at in the open air before anyone was allowed to touch them. You think that's what's happening to me? That I'm becoming a message? I think Han Suk-won has already decided you are one, Ji-hoon said. And I have spent 3 years making certain no one I love becomes a message again. I did not expect to be having this conversation with a woman I have known for 4 days. I want you to understand that this is not how I operate. I do not let people close enough to become a liability. I have built a life specifically designed to prevent this exact conversation from happening. And yet, he agreed, and for the first time since the water, something in his face was unguarded, not soft exactly. He did not seem built for soft, but honest in a way that felt more dangerous than any gun in the house. You pulled me out of the ocean when you had every reason to save yourself instead. I have spent 4 days trying to decide what to do with that fact, and I have made no progress at all. She held his gaze longer than was wise. The room had gone very quiet, the kind of quiet that had weight, the kind she had read about in books and never quite believed in until she felt it herself, pressing against her sternum, making her aware of her own pulse in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Say my name again, she said, before she could stop herself. He did not ask why. He said it slowly, deliberately, the 2 syllables shaped like something he was handling with care. Harlow. It did not sound like the way the hotel clerk had said it, or the way her mother said it when she called home. It sounded like a decision. Neither of them moved. The moment stretched and did not break, and Harlow understood that whatever this was becoming, it had already outgrown the word rescue. The threat announced itself 3 nights later, not with subtlety but with violence. The front gate alarm screaming through the house at 2 in the morning and Ji-hoon's hand closing around her wrist before she had even processed the sound, pulling her out of bed and down the hallway toward the reinforced room beneath the kitchen that she had not known existed until that exact moment. Stay here, he said, and she heard, for the first time, real urgency in his voice, a crack in the careful stillness. Like hell I will. Gunfire erupted somewhere above them, short controlled bursts that she now recognized, 3 days into learning this world, as his men rather than the enemies, disciplined and economical. Ji-hoon's jaw tightened, that same tell she had learned to read, and he made a decision she watched him hate-making. If anyone comes through that door who is not me or Min Jae, you go through the tunnel at the back of this room. It surfaces at the boathouse. There is a vehicle key to my thumbprint and a backup key taped beneath the driver's seat.
You drive.
You do not wait for me. I am not leaving you down here to die for a promise you made to yourself about not losing people. Harlow. Her name again, sharper this time, a command wrapped around something that was not a command at all. I need you alive more than I need to win this fight tonight. Please. The please undid her more than the gunfire had. She had not once heard him use that word, not in 4 days of careful courtesies and unspoken care. She grabbed his sleeve as he turned to go back up the stairs, and for one suspended second neither of them moved, the house shaking with violence above them, and then she did the thing she would spend the rest of the fight trying to justify to herself and never quite managing. She kissed him. Hard, brief, an act with no calculation in it at all, the opposite of everything this world had trained him to be. He went still under it for a fraction of a second, as if his body had to confirm what was happening before it was allowed to respond. And then his hand came up into her hair, and he kissed her back like a man closing a door he had been holding shut with both hands for years. "That was reckless," he said against her mouth, when they broke apart, and she could hear that his voice had roughened. "Maybe reckless is contagious." He left her in the reinforced room with a weapon she had never fired and instructions she intended to ignore the moment it mattered, and went back up into the fight, and Harlow spent the 11 minutes that followed doing the mathematics of every decision that had brought her to a bunker beneath a stranger's kitchen with a gun in her hands, learning she did not regret a single one of them. The gunfire stopped. Silence followed, worse than the noise had been, stretching long enough that she started toward the stairs against every instruction he had given her, because waiting quietly while someone she loved might be dying upstairs was not a kind of obedience she had ever been capable of. She found him in the main hall, upright, alive, blood on his shirt that was not entirely his own, standing over a man in a torn jacket who was very clearly not going to get up again. 4 of Ji-hoon's men were down, wounded, being helped by others. The house smelled like cordite and copper. "You were supposed to stay in the room," he said, though there was no real anger in it, only exhaustion and something that looked dangerously like relief. "I was supposed to a lot of things tonight." She crossed the hall to him, careful of the broken glass, and did not stop until she was close enough to see that his hands, for the first time since she had met him, were not steady. "Han sent his own men this time. Not just a message. He wants you dead before you can consolidate. He wants me dead before I can consolidate, and he wants you dead because you have become the reason I have something left to protect." Ji-hoon looked at her with an expression she had not seen on him before, something raw and unguarded that made the room feel smaller than it was. "I told myself staying detached from you was survival. I've been lying to myself since the moment you pulled me out of that water, Harlow. I am done lying." "Then stop." "I do not know how to love someone without it becoming a weapon someone else can use," he said, quiet enough that only she could hear it. "That is the truth. That is what my mother's death taught me, and I have organized my entire life around never learning that lesson twice. Then we make sure Han doesn't get the chance to teach it to you again." She said it with a steadiness that surprised her, because somewhere in the last hour, she had stopped being a woman caught in someone else's war and become a person choosing to fight one. The plan she proposed the next morning was the kind of morally gray she had spent her whole nursing career avoiding, the kind of choice that did not have a clean side. Han Suk-won had a weakness Ji-hoon's intelligence had identified months earlier and never used, a shipment of falsified documents that, if exposed to the right rival faction, would turn Han's remaining allies against him faster than any bullet could. It required Harlow's fluency in 3 languages and a document review she was, technically, still contracted to perform for the very logistics company Han had used as cover. "If we do this," Ji-hoon said, watching her across the table where she had spread the documents his people had recovered, "you are no longer a bystander in any sense the law would recognize. You would be choosing to participate." "I already chose," Harlow said. "The moment I pulled you out of that water, I stopped being a bystander. I'm just catching up to what that means." She worked through the documents for 6 hours straight, translating and cross-referencing shipping manifests until she found the discrepancy Ji-hoon's analysts had missed, a route logged twice under 2 different registries, proof that Han had been skimming from the very organization he claimed loyalty to for years before his betrayal ever became violent. It was not a smoking gun. It was better. It was proof his own allies could not forgive. The confrontation happened 4 days later, at a shipping yard on the Miami River that Harlow would remember for the rest of her life in fragments, floodlights and shipping containers stacked like a maze, Ji-hoon beside her in a black coat that made him look like something carved rather than dressed, and Han Suk-won waiting at the center of it with 6 men and the particular calm of someone who believed he had already won. "You brought the woman," Han said, when they were close enough to speak without shouting, his eyes moving over Harlow with a contempt that made her skin crawl. "I did not expect you to be sentimental, Ji-hoon. Your father would be disappointed." "My father is dead," Ji-hoon said. "And you murdered his second chance at loyalty the day you decided your own ambition mattered more than the family that raised you. I am not here to relitigate the past. I am here to end it. With what? Feelings. Han laughed, short and ugly. You brought a translator to a war. I brought the woman who found the shipping manifests you falsified for 6 years before you ever raised a hand against my father's organization, Harlow said, stepping forward before Ji-hoon could answer for her. Because this was her moment to claim, and she was not going to let him spend it protecting her from her own choice. 2 registries, same route, same dates, different numbers. I imagine your remaining allies would be very interested to learn you were stealing from them the entire time you claimed to be protecting them. Something shifted in Han's face, the first crack in his composure, and Harlow watched Ji-hoon see it too, watched him recognize the opening she had built for him with 6 hours of unglamorous, meticulous work that had nothing to do with guns or bravado, and everything to do with the kind of intelligence this world had underestimated in her from the very beginning. The men behind Han hesitated. Loyalty, Harlow understood in that moment, was never as absolute as men like Han believed it to be. It was a debt, and debts could be called due. What happened next moved fast, the way real violence always did, nothing like the choreography of a story, and Harlow's own hands were not idle in it. When one of Han's men broke formation and lunged for her, certain she was the softest target in the yard, she used the training that had never fully left her, a hard strike to the throat that she had learned in a self-defense class a lifetime ago and never once thought she would need, and put him down long enough for Ji-hoon's men to close the gap. Han did not survive the confrontation his own allies turned their backs on. It was not Ji-hoon's hand that ended it, in the end, though she would never fully learn or need to know the details, only that when the floodlit yard went quiet again, Ji-hoon was standing, unhurt, watching her with an expression that made the 6 hours of documents and the terror of the last 4 days feel, suddenly, survivable. You were not supposed to be a target in that fight, he said, when they were finally alone, back at the glass house on the water, both of them still catching their breath from adrenaline that had not yet finished leaving their bodies. I wasn't a target, Harlow said. I was a participant. There's a difference, and you're going to have to get used to it, because I'm not interested in being protected from the parts of your life that matter. He crossed the room to her, slow, deliberate, none of the urgency of the bunker or the shipping yard in it now. Only certainty. I do not know how to offer you an ordinary life. I want you to understand that clearly before anything else is said tonight. There will be more men like Han. There will be more nights like the one in that hallway. I am not a man who can promise you safety. I didn't survive a plane crash looking for safety, she said. I survived it looking for something worth the risk. I think I found it. He kissed her then the way he had not allowed himself to at the water's edge 4 days earlier, unhurried, certain, a claim rather than a question, and Harlow understood, with the same clarity that had made her pull a stranger out of a sinking jet without a single second of hesitation, that she was not being rescued. She had made a choice, and she intended to keep making it, every single day it required. 3 weeks later, when the paperwork on Han's remaining network had been quietly absorbed and the story of the crash had faded from the news cycle into the kind of footnote most tragedies became, Harlow stood on the balcony of the glass house watching the sun go down over water that no longer frightened her, and Ji-hoon came to stand beside her without announcing himself, close enough that his shoulder pressed against hers. I never thanked you properly, he said, for pulling me out. You built me a bunker and put 12 men on my street the next morning. I'd say we're square. That was not gratitude. That was fear of losing something I had not yet let myself want. He turned to look at her, and there was none of the careful stillness left in his face, only the honesty she had earned from him one dangerous night at a time. This is gratitude. He did not say anything else.
He did not need to.
Harlow Bennett, 22 years old, 6 years removed from a trauma ward in Atlanta and 3 weeks removed from a plane crash that should have killed her, looked out at a city she had never planned to fall for and understood that some rescues went both directions, that the water had taken 4 lives and given her one she had chosen with both eyes open, and that whatever came next, storm or stillness, she was not going to spend it wondering what she might have missed by playing it safe. If a story like this ever finds you between one late night and the next, if you have ever pulled someone out of the wreckage of your own life, without stopping to calculate the cost, you already understand exactly why Harlow never looked back. If this story kept you here until the very last line, you know what to do. Like it, subscribe, and tell us in the comments which moment made your heart stop first. There are more stories like this one waiting for you, and the next one might just be the one you cannot stop thinking about.